See, I used the same slide template I used the last time I gave a talk at the Ember meetup. I only changed my email address because I particularly like that if you want to get in touch with me, you can just send an email to srxp.com. So try forgetting that from now on. Yeah, I'm the reason everyone from SRXP is here, I think, because indeed at some point I decided that we had a system. SRXP was started in the second half of 2010, and it was just basically building out a prototype. Like I think everyone who's been involved in the startup knows how this goes. You have a prototype, build a minimal viable product, and then if it's successful, it just grows and just grows and just grows, and at some point you're like, okay, where's this going? This is unmaintainable, and we need to change it. So at this point, basically I decided we need to do something differently. I'm going to allocate a lot of time to change our system so we can really put our core product, which is basically our data, and our apps, which is basically the way to access our data, to make these two separate things that are better maintainable, separation of concerns. So this was, I did this check this afternoon. I just figured, let's see what the first commit in our web system, our new web app was. So as you can see here, it was October 3rd, 2012. And then I went ahead and went to the Ember.js repository and checked what the Ember version at that point in time was. It was 0.9, which doesn't seem too far of a stretch from 1.9 we're at now, but it's pretty much an entirely different thing. I checked the README too at this point. You should do it if you have the time. It's pretty funny. So a lot has changed since then, and I think we were talking earlier with some guys. Like I said, we were early adopters and we were paying the price. Back then, there was basically nothing. You were given the framework, which had the data bindings, the views, as we all know them, but there was no one telling you like, how am I going to chain this together? There were some examples. So yeah, you have this view, and then this data is bound to it. It's like, yeah, where does the view come from? What folder is the view in? Where do I store it? And how does the script know about the view? And so you have to pretty much do it all yourself. So we set something up there. Ember data at this point, I think, was at version 0.1, maybe even below that. So we looked at it and decided it wasn't for us. It wasn't stable enough, and rolled our own. And lots of breaking changes. Those of you who talked to me in the past know particularly about our history with query params, which is a requirement for our system, basically, which has changed a lot in the past. So I thought, let's just do some stats about our system, since we've been working on it for like 2.5 years. Figured, let's check how many routes do we have. It turns out we have 112 routes. This is just the files they're in. There are some files that have multiple routes to find them, which is bad practice, but there are some. I know there are some. So I think the actual number is closer to 120. If you're curious how we're doing that, we also have, I think the award for the worst route name ever goes to our developer who isn't here tonight. It's this.
What?
Yeah, that's.
Who did that?
That's Oet. Yeah. I mean, he didn't have a choice. This is kind of the paradigm you're forced into, and it's the only way to keep it make sense. But we nest routes up to a very deep level, so everything in our app is pretty much routable. If you're at a certain page, and you copy the URL and you paste it into another browser window, you're at that same page. So as soon as you have, in this case, it is an interface where you manage the customers through the CPU user. You manage their export formats. So you're within a customer, you're in their export formats. You have a list. You're within an export format, and then you're in a specific one which needs a specific logic to handle. And there is your fantastic, ridiculous long route name.
Do you pay any specific performance penalties or any problems with that kind of strategy?
No. I mean, they're just strings, right? Under the hood, your computer is perfectly capable of dealing with strings, and the contents of the file are going to outweigh the name of the file orders of magnitude, so that really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that it's slightly limited type. But of course the views are going to be nested in directories because that's the way it's...
And maintaining something like this is probably also an issue, like, oh, does it still mean what it's telling?
Well,
it's super descriptive.
But that's the thing about it. It exactly means what it's telling you, and it's this is for this specific route. I don't like it, but it is the way to get there without breaking out of Ember convention. And I think when you decide to break out of convention, you need to have a very good reason to do so. And this might not be a very good reason. So I sort of agree with its existence, even if it doesn't make me happy per se. We have some at another level. Like I can show you some. I can get into our system and show you some more simple ones. Already here you're at some levels of nesting. This is the submit interface, and in the submit interface you can select a report. The default report is the inbox report, so there you're already at the second level of nesting. So I'm selecting a report now. This report, which is random approved report, and then within that report I can select a receipt or a mileage. So this is also the submit view, where you view a report, expenses, where it lists the expenses within the report, where you view another expense within that route. This already at our basic system you have a pretty deep level of nesting within your routes. But it actually works quite intuitively once you're working with it, and you only need to type the route name once, obviously. And it's really only 15,000 lines of JavaScript. I was surprised when I did this afternoon. I did a couple of checks. As you can see, I excluded the vendor directory, so this doesn't include Ember itself. When I include the vendor directory, I think we had close to 50,000 lines. But our own code, it's only including handlebars, it's only like 20,000 lines. So I think that shows something about Ember, about its expressivity in particular, that you can have a complex app that has 112 routes in only 15,000 lines of code. So yeah, I didn't really have anything in particular to talk tonight. Look at our beautiful sports shirts that these guys have printed for me. Thank you very much. So if you're interested in anything in particular that we're doing, any techniques that we're using, we have a lot of experience with Ember. And get in touch, talk to me.
I'm curious actually about how you guys deal with the rapid release cycle of Ember these days.
Yeah, we're curious as well.
No, but you guys don't update them, right?
Yeah, we're at 1.9 now.
Okay, yeah.
The biggest issue we've had recently was we were stuck at a beta of 1.6, which was released at some point, which had the query parameters changes we needed.
Okay.
And then there were some breaking changes in between that were like, they're API compatible, and they're really not. Well, they're API compatible, but you're not just always using just the API, right? There's also always some magic going on. I think every app has some stuff that they need to do that you need to defeat the framework in order to do it. So that has some breaking stuff, especially because we're working with the beta. But we're at 1.9 now, which is working well, and 1.10 of course has handlebars, HTML bars, and we want to switch to that. But once again, it's API compatible, which in this case means that you have to rewrite every single helper you're using, because every non-trivial helper somehow accesses the handlebars context.
Yep.
And how do
right? So, and I think they also changed the function signature of helpers.
Yeah, you now have to do like, if you write in a library, you have to check with HTML bars or handlebars, and then write two helpers. But if you just switch from HTML bars to, from handlebars to HTML bars, you have to rewrite all your make bound helper things because they get different arguments.
Yeah,
Because the
yeah.
first argument is now an array and things like
Which
that.
makes sense because it was always like every helper you were writing in the past started with, okay, I'm gonna take all the arguments and I'm gonna slice them to get everything but the last one because the last one is the options, which is like, yeah.
Yep.
And might as well just put that in separate arguments. So it makes sense. For 1.10 we're gonna have to rewrite, and we still have to rewrite to Ember CLI. So this will continue this discussion when we're going to do this.
And how do you, okay, so it's a pretty big app, and you're not using Ember CLI. What are you guys using for tests, or do you do tests? And how do you know?
Working on it.
No, I'm just curious because I mean, upgrading then.
Maybe you can give the talk.
Yeah, Luis.
No,
Luis knows more about that.
no.
No.
We actually started this afternoon looking at how to do that, and yeah, so yeah, I have much to tell, but yeah, we was looking at how Ember CLI does it, how Embers say how to do it, and yeah, no.
It's not that we have no tests per se. It's just that our front end part is pretty much untested right now. Like our core product, our data is actually pretty safe. Test coverage wise, but
Yeah, I mean, it's a familiar story for me as well, for my work. I mean, I don't work on such large projects though, that it's sort of, well, at least traditionally it's easier to test back-end stuff, right?
yeah.
Data-oriented stuff.
Well, the talk on EmberConf from last week, there's a TDD talk, and well, it looked actually very simple. We're sometimes doing tests, so it's better than none, but we still aren't at like we're test-driven development on the front end.
I think once the tool chain is there,
it is now,
it's
but
simple.
Once you have it set up and you work like
Yeah.
that, it's a lot easier. But if you have to make the switch,
Because
that's
this is always
usually a lot more time.
This is
consuming.
always the problem with testing. You have to minimize the bureaucracy required to do it, otherwise your developers, they're just like, no matter how driven they are, they're not going to do it. Especially if there's a sales team on their asses, like, yeah, we need this new feature, we need this new feature. So what have you been doing last week? Well, I wrote like 10 tests. This is, which is great, because somewhere in the future you're going to notice these tests break, and this is going to save you from releasing a product that would otherwise piss off a lot of customers. But it's hard to defend, and it's hard to set yourself to if you have to figure out how to get Phantom.js working.
but TDD is that right?
Yeah, no, yeah, sure. And we're definitely because we're at the point where it's becoming a problem for us now. Because stuff occasionally breaks. I think it is more stable than you'd expect it to be from a non-tested app, but stuff occasionally breaks where it really shouldn't have. And that's why we're starting to write tests now.
Yeah,
It's also going to make migrations to future versions of Ember easier.
Yeah, we had the discussion whether we should like migrate to CLI first, or start writing at least some tests, and then migrate to Ember CLI. So you have
I think that first is wiser.
What?
Yeah, I think, well, I think you should first write tests before you refactor to Ember CLI.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, well,
Ideally-
you'll break
That-
things refactoring to Ember CLI for sure.
Ideally,
That's
that's
the agreement we
definitely
had.
the case. The only problem there is that it's infinitely easier to write tests when you're already on Ember CLI.
Yeah.
Well, the setup is probably infinitely easier, but writing the test, I don't
Writing
think
the
shouldn't be that
testing
much
is
of a
also
difference.
the setup is
Yeah.
the setup
But
is-
again, so then we have to decide, okay, what do we need to test before we make the switch to Ember CLI? Because we're obviously not going to cover everything before we make that switch, because that's too much work.
Insane.
Yeah. And you don't even want that usually. There's always parts of your code base which aren't that
Yeah.
risky to.
Yeah, but presumably you you have some procedures to do some manual testing as well, right?
Yeah, it's all set up. I think what's great about large chunks of our front end is that there are some portions of important code, and if they break, you see it everywhere.
Okay.
Like the model layer, the piece that marks data dirty and saves it to the backend, basically. If that's broken, then you're going to find out immediately.
This
This
is
is
also
just
easy to test. Yeah, then why write test?
Writing a test for that one should be easy.
yeah. That's also well. There's some pretty pretty complicated stuff with asynchronicity in the model layer as well.
Are you still using your custom?
Yeah,
Do you think you'll ever switch to Ember data?
it has no priority now. This is working fine.
Oh, okay.
And I know Ember data at this point would be the better decision if you'd write for it now, but I know that there are probably some things that we are doing which are incompatible with that, and you'd end up fighting against it. And at the end of the day, it is a complicated problem, but it's not that complicated that you cannot solve it yourself.
Right.
And
Well,
the
you can
layer
make some assumptions that Ember data can't make, right? When you write your own custom solution.
Yeah, you can tailor it specifically to the way that your API is set up, which is convenient. I mean, I'm not a roll your own guy. Like, I wouldn't have done it if the tools were available at the time that we needed them. But in this case, I think it has less priority than a lot of other stuff.
What would Ember data bring you if you would move to it?
Someone else debugging my code.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's
the
not-
main advantage of another library, right?
There's not some specific problems you have right now with Ember data, which is
No,
solved out of the problem.
no. Like I said, our model layer is pretty solid. Yeah. It works.
The good thing about Ember data is the models, but the bad thing is like the fetching of the data, because Ember data is pretty dumb in that.
Yeah.
So
I can-
we're fighting against that too. But so we're sometimes thinking of, well, we should roll our own thing to get the data and then use the Ember data models.
Yeah, and also what I have with Ember data, I always have to do extra stuff. Yeah, I cannot rely only on Ember data, because it does either too much or it doesn't do the right thing, or it wants to pull everything in where I just want to sniff at it before I pull it in.
Maybe we should open source our model layer. There's other people maintain it as well.
Yeah, I think about that. But it's
We
pretty
might learn something from it.
it's specific, quite specifically tailored at this point. We could think about that. Definitely. I think we might open source our entire app in the future anyway. Because what's the point of keeping it closed source? It's already open to you if you can deminify it. Our core product doesn't have to be open source as long as this is. We can only encourage people writing stuff that talks to our API. So, yeah, that might be an idea. Alright, anyone have anything more? Questions, remarks? This is already more of a discussion than I even hoped for, which is good.
If the management thinks Ember is a girl, then how do you sell the transition to Ember CLI? Because I think you need a month off, perhaps.
I'm really stubborn. That's basically it. And yeah, so
You need to figure out a way to do it transitional, right? Not in one bang, but do it part by part. Can you do that?
that would be
That
weird.
when that's possible.
I don't know.
That's the best way to sell it. It's just like, look, we have here is a module. This is a separate part of the program. I can write it like this. It works. Then it took me a week. You might want to do another one next time. And that's the best way to go. Any transition is always you want to be able to do it partially, because if you do it in one big bang, everything will break.
Yeah, I know.
There's only one certainty that it will break.
Yeah, but this
You
transition
don't-
will
you
break,
have-
break. So
I wonder if that's even possible. I don't know enough about
I
it.
don't. Yeah, I'd have to research whether that's possible. I think
Yeah.
it would. I think it would be a very hard problem. It might be a harder of problem than the original problem, which is.
Why?
well, my best advice would be go up one version at a time, or things like that. If you're really behind, because if you go from like a really old version to the newest version, you will break everything and don't know where to look for the changes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Another strategy would be to, for anything new you add, you use it. If you somehow.
Yeah, but if it's like Ember CLI, it just changes the entire way that your files are stored. So I'm not sure if we. And maybe at some point we might be able to like have Ember CLI and then at the same time run our own code the way it's running right now.
I don't know. If
Yeah, you have to find a point where you can then make the split basically.
Well,
somewhere up in.
Ember CLI requires you to rewrite everything to module structure, so that's like one big thing you already have to do.
Yeah.
And
Can you do that without actually doing Ember CLI? So rewrite to the module structure
You
without.
could
Yeah.
take
Okay,
take the module stuff out of broccoli, but probably you don't want to do that.
But
You
can't
could
take
you
the
could you
broccoli
could take
out.
the step, the whole ES6 module step you could take out. But then does the resolver work then? I don't know.
the
It's like
resolver doesn't work. That the Ember CLI project injects a resolver of its own.
Yeah, but it relies on it relies on ES6 modules, which is a different. It first does the ES6 module thing, and then it runs its own resolver. So you might take the ES6 module stuff out, and then but then you have to feed it to the resolver in a way that it can understand. So you might first want to go to the actual certified Ember CLI folder structure. And that would be first step.
That's not
If
much
that doesn't
different than-
break, you might go then change to the module structure. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's more of a thought
Yeah,
experiment.
I've given it some thought myself. It would be useful if the CloseGuard guys were here because they have the same problem.
Yeah, and they just guys
They
from
started
Ukraine doing
with
it.
Ember slightly
outsourced
later
it,
than we
right?
did,
Yeah.
but still before Ember CLI was around. And indeed, they hired some guys from the Ukraine and did the transition in 2 weeks. I think.
But,
I think
30
they're-
rounds, right?
They're-
They went to AppKit first, right?
Yeah.
I think they went to it pretty much at the point when AppKit was in the process of making the transition to CLI.
Okay.
So then AppKit was already very, very similar to CLI. And when the transition to actual CLI came along, it wasn't that much of a problem. But I also think their app is orders of magnitude smaller than ours.
Yeah, I thought they had like
So if-
30 routes at that time, so
So if the 2 weeks is any indication,
it's going to take us 8.
He needs to do exponentially, right? So it's 4 times bigger,
With-
it's going to be
with-
6 times harder.
20,000 lines of code. I think it will be more than that.
yeah. Yeah, well, we won't know until we try. I guess the best approach at some point would just be set up a new project and rewrite some things and see how long it takes.
Yeah, just do an experiment.
Yeah, exactly. Experiment. And if after 2 days you're like, yeah, I'm nowhere, my laptop crashed and
Try it out, try again.
I don't know how it's JavaScript, but it's sec faulting anyway. then you might want to stop. But,
So if you prepare for that, you can handle anything.
I'm always prepared for that. I have days like that.
Yeah?
Maybe you should try creating a small project that has the same structure as your app, and then try to transition from that to the
Yeah.
newest one and see how it works.
Yeah, that's.
When do we start?
I'd start sooner rather than later. I like transitions. It's a big thing
Keeps
to
it
do.
exciting.
It's like cleaning. This is a bad metaphor because I don't like cleaning up my room, but it's like
You like the results.
sometimes it's fun to
Well,
like.
that's a good metaphor because you're not cleaning up your room for a long while, and then you have to do everything at one
Yeah,
time.
but
so-
you like to like. I think the difference here is with cleaning up your room, you just like to toss everything out of the closets on the floor and then put it back neatly in a way that you like to have it, right? The only real difference here is that you don't have a Git history of your room. So if it goes wrong, I can just stand in my room and be like, room reset hard, and then the room is back to its original state. So I guess. Yeah, we just have to start this at some point. But I do appreciate you guys' feedback on this. We'll keep you updated on how it's going when we're doing it. I'll surely give a talk on it. The meetup that we have done this or attempted this and determined that it was impossible.
Yeah, cool.
Yes. All right.
All right, yeah, thanks for giving this
Ben?
session.